Oh, there's a play button up here to push.
Oh, no.
Won't you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion for the sake of the world. This delusion, it's gotta go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live Sunday, September 5th, 2010, and we're glad you all joined us on this award-winning television program live from Austin, Texas. I'll get back to the award-winning thing in just a moment. As I mentioned, this is a live public access TV show, and it's sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road beginning around 11:30, except for the first Sunday of the month when we host our lecture series at the Austin History Center, except there's a slight change this month in that today was the first Sunday and we did not have the lecture. The lecture will be next Sunday. September 12th, Dr. James D. will be down to talk about the second wave of secular humanism, how scholarship challenges religion, or undermines religion, actually. The lecture started around 12:15. The doors open at noon. The Austin History Center, located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to that event or any of our other events. You don't have to be a member to attend. And speaking of the other events, they include an atheist happy hour every Thursday at the Dog and Duck Pub, beginning around 7 o'clock or so. And after this program's over, we're on the air till 6 o'clock. We'll be at Threadgill's at 301 West Riverside Drive for dinner and drinks or chatting or whatever. So we're on from 4:30 to 6 p.m. We'll be down at Threadgill's around 6:30 or so, and you're welcome to join us down there. For more information about the Atheist Community of Austin, you can visit the ACA website, www.atheist-community.org, and you'll find a frequently asked questions page as well as a calendar showing all the events that are coming up, regular and special events. And if you don't get through on the telephone today, or if you don't want to get through, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-host, some of the people behind the scenes. We cannot possibly answer all the email we get, but we do make an attempt to answer quite a bit of them. And we do try to read all of them as long as you make sure you put AETV or NPR for Nonprofits Radio in the subject line. It should get through most of our spam filters, and we'll do what we can to get feedback. I'm so far behind on email again. It's just been pouring in like crazy. And there's a lot of stuff going on. I have a lot of announcements. I'm going to go ahead and pretend to put up the pause bars for the people who skip the local announcements, because not all of the following announcements are local. I've already mentioned the lecture next Sunday, September 12th. That's here in Austin. September 16th, also in Austin, Americans United is going to be the event that I talked about before, where they're going to discuss how believers and non-believers can communicate more effectively toward common goals. That's been moved up to September 16th. It's at 6:30 p.m. at the Daniel Rees Library. September 25th is the ACA's annual bat cruise. We get a boat, go out on the lake, and watch the bats go out and feed. Austin has the largest metropolitan bat population on the planet. That begins at 6 p.m., but prior to that, at the UU Church here in town, I'll be giving a lecture on the superiority of secular morality. That starts at, I believe, 3 o'clock, and then after the bat cruise, there are some of us who are going to be going to Esther's Follies on 6th Street. It's a separate non-ACA event, but we're pretty much going to go down there in droves anyway. So you can get more information about that at the website there. There's a calendar up there of events. As a reminder, October 8th through 10th is the Texas Free Thought Convention. You can go to texasfreethoughtconvention.com for more information. That's going to be held up in the Dallas area. And November 16th, I'll be at UMBC, that's the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, for a debate on the source of human morality. We're finalizing the details now, and I'll get more information as it becomes available, but that's basically like 5 minutes from the Baltimore-Washington International Airport. So if you're in DC or the Baltimore area, we'll get the information. You can come down and join us for that. And on the 18th, I'll be at UT, but that's a private thing anyway. So that's all the announcements. No, it's not. No, it's not. There are 2 extra announcements, and these are kind of special. First, we won. When I said award-winning, I wasn't kidding. Every year, the Austin Chronicle does a Best of Austin. Oh, look, it's green, so the background shows through. Does a Best of Austin issue where readers and critics get to vote on different things. We won the Readers Award for Best Public Access TV Show in Austin, thanks in part to all of you around the world who decided to email in as soon as we posted the contest on Facebook and the blog. For more information about the blog, you can go to atheistexperience.blogspot.com, and a lot of us are posting over there in addition to our Facebook pages and whatever else. And by the way, I've hit the limit on Facebook. So there's now the regular page. Facebook limits you to like 5,000 friends or whatever.
Yeah.
And I way over. And so there's just a default, I guess, kind of fan page or whatever. And I'm using that more. I'm just posting things there instead of the default page because it has no limit. So the last thing, and this one's actually legitimately important and significant, on Tuesday, the Atheist Community of Austin will be mailing out its 2010 Voters Guide candidate questionnaire to 455 candidates in the state of Texas for both national and state positions. It consists of 24 statements that they just rate whether they strongly agree, uncertain, disagree, or strongly disagree. It's very similar to the one we did last year, although we did make some edits based on feedback. If you live in Texas and you have whether you have a favorite candidate or not, contact candidates that are running for offices in your area and remind them that they should be receiving this and you'd like for them to fill it out and return it. It's important that the secular community's views and positions are represented by all elected officials. This is, after all, a secular nation, despite groans and posturing to the contrary. And we would like to get as much feedback from candidates as we can. There's no assessment or filtering afterwards. It is posted on the website, warts and all, with whatever answers individual candidates provided. And the purpose is to give all voters, secular or not, a list of statements that they can then evaluate to determine whether or not candidates are suitable for them. So we encourage everybody to make sure they contact their potential elected representatives and officials and remind them that this is coming, and it'll be posted on the ACA website just as soon as we get our results back. And that is all the announcements.
Okay.
I got
Great.
bars. Jen's with. I never said who the heck we were. I'm Matt Dillahunty, and this is Jen Peeples.
Yep. It came up.
Yeah. I just got so distracted.
I know.
don't
It's
know.
okay.
So what is it that we're actually going to talk about today?
Well, we, from time to time, get email from people asking, hey, religion is so pervasive. Do you think it had some kind of evolutionary explanation? What's the purpose of religion? And as a sort of an extension of that, do you think it's actually necessary for some people? Do you think people need religion in their lives for whatever reason? So I wanted to take a few minutes and address that topic briefly. And so to get started, I want to say that we need to distinguish between religion and belief in a God, because they're slightly different. There's several definitions of religion even. And the definition that I'm using today for this purpose is the rituals associated with someone's observance of their faith. So it's not the belief itself, it's the rituals that they use to observe that, and I guess some of the things that attach to those. So in talking a little bit about what religion did for human societies earlier in our history, it's important to talk a little bit about what happened in hunter-gatherer societies versus what happened to agricultural societies, because the rise of specific religious rituals, as far as we know, correlates to the rise of agricultural societies. So in hunter-gatherer societies, we typically looked at people in small groups, say 50 to 150 people, roughly. And in groups that small, it's pretty easy to keep track of everybody. You generally either know people or you're related to them, and everybody's reputation is known. And that's kind of an important thing, because it turns out that reputational concerns dominate people's behavior in a religious environment. So also in hunter-gatherer societies, there's really no personal or private property, and there's just a few personal possessions. So there's not a lot of property that you can leave to your descendants. So there's no concerns with inheritance issues. And punishment for antisocial behavior is pretty simple. You got kicked out of the group. And we actually see this in modern-day hunter-gatherer societies that have not been in some way contaminated by modern societies. So the people that are actually remote and still live pretty much as immediate return hunter-gatherers, you still see this sort of behavior. Now, we contrast that with agricultural societies, and in agricultural societies you had much larger groups, and so it became impossible to keep track of everybody personally. You had to have some other system of doing this. And you also needed a method of identifying group members. And this is important because now you've got personal property, you've got something you can transmit to your descendants, and it's important that people from outside the group don't come in and get your stuff. Also, with more complex groups, you need a more formal way of transmitting the rules. And of course, the priesthood sort of filled in this gap of having a formal way of transmitting the rules. And so, now that we have some idea of the difference between the two groups, the hunter-gatherer people and the agricultural societies, you can move on to a discussion about how did religious rituals come into play? What did they actually do for these agricultural societies? Well, one of the obvious things is that it serves as a means of group identification. You can identify the individuals who belong to this certain group because if they are following these rules, then you know, and it may be certain rules about dress, and it might be certain appearance, like married men are required to wear a beard, or you're required to cut your hair in a certain way. There's other more costly signs of membership, like circumcision, for example. And it also, some of these rituals kind of harken back to this ancestor worship that was probably pretty common in hunter-gatherer societies even. But we see this in, for example, invoking a heavenly father. Clearly there's an allusion to ancestor worship there. And some of these rituals also promote group solidarity. So if everybody participates in some kind of religious festival or something like that, and you know, you've got a whole group of people working toward some common goal, even if it's worshiping an ancestor, and so it promotes this sort of group solidarity. Another important thing that these early religious rituals did was that it minimized cheating. Okay, and this is very important because some of these rituals are very costly. I mentioned circumcision before, but also if you look through the Old Testament, there's, you know, rule after rule about sacrificing livestock. There's specific rules about you've got to kill, you know, a cow and a ram, and one is for the sin offering and the other's for the burnt offering. But the bottom line is you're going to take these very costly animals and you're going to sacrifice them, and nobody's going to derive any nutritional benefit from them. But providing this sacrifice is sort of an outward indication that, yep, I'm invested in this group, and I'm so invested that I'm even going to risk my livelihood to promote the group's beliefs. Now, the other thing that happens is that this belief in this omniscient deity who's watching you even when other people can't minimizes, it inhibits antisocial behavior. So that's an important method of social control here. You've got people who, you know, God's watching you all the time. And there's even, I was looking at a Christian school, private school, and one of the things in their handbook to the students was consider Jesus to be participating in any school activity. So they've got somebody watching them all the time.
I remember growing up, I mean, of course, the idea that God knew everything is a fairly good deterrent to the, for the people who have bought into that idea, but it's not completely effective. Because on some level, people tend to realize that they have managed to get away with things, or apparently get away with things, and if there was somebody watching, that wouldn't be the case. And so there are times when the various God concepts fail to be a sufficient deterrent, in which case this is when the religions come in and reinforce this idea. In my case, though, what was most effective was the idea that my parents didn't necessarily have to be watching me, but they were most likely going to find out everything I did anyway, through the network of people that we lived around. So if, and on more than one occasion, rather than mention how they found out, it was, God's not going to let you get away with this, which is how parents find out. It's, God is working through these other people to make sure your parents find out, to enforce, God's laws on you. So.
Yes. Well, I mentioned before that religion provides a means of transmitting rules and also legitimizing political authority. And this is kind of important when you get complex societies that they generally have some kind of government structure. And traditionally, the priesthood, the religious leaders within a group, have had some role in either sanctioning or in some way legitimizing a ruler. So there's this belief that the leaders are chosen by whatever god the people worship, and therefore they're legitimate. So they derive their legitimacy from the fact they are chosen by God. And in some cases, for example, the Egyptians, there was a belief that the pharaoh was actually this human manifestation of a god. And so we still see it in some of the language here. You've heard the reference, divine right of kings,
Right.
as if, kings have some, divinity of their own. And of course, more recently with George W. Bush, who believed that he was chosen by God to be the president. Yeah.
Which, may be the case, because he clearly wasn't chosen by the people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Just can't pass up those golden opportunities.
Well, and who knew Sandra Day O'Connor was God, right?
Yeah. I don't know. She was really high on my list, but not quite to the God
quite
status.
there, So this kind of brings up another point, that religion, in the form of these rituals, is actually this cultural trait. And it kind of gets to the answer to one of the questions. Does this have some kind of evolutionary advantage? Is there sort of like an evolutionary purpose to religion? And the answer is that no, not really. And I'll explain that. Cultural traits are not subject to natural selection in the same way that, for example, genetic traits are. Religious rituals, any kind of cultural ritual, has a conscious purpose. And you can lose your cultural baggage, but it's pretty hard to lose your genetic baggage. If you inherited the trait that predisposes you to type 2 diabetes, there's not really much you can do about that, but you can get over believing in a God.
There are some cultural traits, though, in some aspects of religion that are subject to natural selection. If your cultural traits are such that you take actions that can, reduce your chances of surviving. For example, if you're sacrificing too much livestock,
Right.
that type of thing.
Well, and that's the last point I was going to make on this. Religion as a cultural trait. The rituals emerged as a product of other traits that are adaptive. So while the religion itself might not be very adaptive, the traits underpinning them actually are. And those are things like social cohesion and altruism and cooperation. And this being willing to obey your parents and wanting to please your parents.
Right.
And so that's why this, invoking a heavenly father or parental figures in religious imagery is so powerful for people, because it reinforces this natural tendency to want to please your parents and to do what your parents tell you to do.
Yeah, and it's not, this idea that religion is a byproduct isn't something we can, prove to a high degree of certainty, because we don't have a time machine. We can't go back and rewatch it. But it's not that much of a leap to apply some inductive reasoning to what we know about human behavior and say that, okay, there is an evolutionary advantage to children being reliant on their parents, as you mentioned, that that there is some wisdom in the people who have actually lived for a while to be passed on to the young, and it's good that they're to some degree willing to accept it, with just like credulously, just bam, yes, okay, we'll do it. So this reliance on authority, these things are good early on, but they don't always go away.
Right.
And it would be ideal if we had, for example, a mechanism that made us reliant on authorities up to a certain age or a certain level of brain development, whatever, and then our reliance on authorities waned dramatically. Instead, I think it only wanes a bit, and that's why we end up. Oftentimes, what people will do is mistake which is the authority, which is where you get into fallacies along these lines, and so the reliance on authority and the other aspects that would benefit in other situations kind of get clumped together in a little group, and religion becomes that byproduct of to kind of assuage the fear of the unknown and that type of thing.
Yes. Well, and also, even if you argue that religion itself is adaptive in some way, even adaptive traits can become maladaptive if conditions change. And that sort of brings us up to, I guess, one of the questions that gets asked a lot is religion actually necessary for some people? Do some people require religion? And when people ask this question, they're usually implying a couple of things, that people need a God to keep them from committing bad acts, or that they need a God to provide comfort because the truth is just too much to bear.
Right.
And I would say that this may be an example of why religion is so maladaptive today. Because if you look, I pulled this up, there's a Gallup poll that looked, this was actually just released on the 31st of August. And it was talking about religiosity in the world's poorest nations, okay? And number one on the list is Bangladesh. 99% of the people there are religious, okay? And then it's got, another list. You can actually go to the Gallup site and look this up. But these are some of the poorest nations in the world: Yemen, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Somaliland, Burundi, and they're just. I think that what's happening in these countries is that reliance on religion as a comfort or as a source of enlightenment or whatever is actually preventing them from facing the truth and confronting their own problems and ultimately solving their problems. So far from providing this source of comfort, this is actually exacerbating their situation. And that's why I am actually an anti-theist in addition to being an atheist, because I think religion is doing grave harm to people in poor nations. Which also brings up an interesting question, because we've cited the study that shows that religious belief is inversely proportional to like social ills.
Yeah.
So the
societal health.
Societal health.
If it's
yeah.
inverse.
Yeah. So the healthier the society, the lower the belief in religion. So the question is it religious belief that drives societal health, or is the increase in societal health the thing that drives down religion?
Yeah.
So.
And it's one of those things that we may not be able to find out, or at least we're not going to find out anytime soon. And it goes for the question of whether or not religion has evolutionary benefits.
Yeah.
Well, clearly, you can find benefits in all kinds of beliefs, whether they're
Right.
true or not. And we talked about it a little bit last week. I mentioned the idea that, for example, your loved one has moved on is a good way to it's an effective way, I won't say good, effective way of easing guilt and a sense of loss.
Right.
The question that we need to ask is, are we better off by eliminating this crutch surrounding death and actually educate people about life and death and the practical reality, such that when it occurs, the guilt is already lessened, that or the loss and pain and mourning is already lessened, because they have a measured understanding of what's actually happening. And we've kind of taken the fear out at the knees on that method. Now, which method actually works better, I have no idea. My position is that I actually care enough about the truth that I'm not interested in comfortable delusions. If people happen to believe religious claims or supernatural claims or whatever claim, simply because it makes them feel good, that's certainly their prerogative. It's not anything I would do. It's something that I don't think is necessarily a good idea. And I don't even know how you can have a discussion about it. If somebody says, you know, we've talked before about, you know, Martin Gardner, a great skeptic who's also a theist, and he basically said that he doesn't apply didn't apply skepticism to his theistic beliefs. They were simply a way of eliminating despair, and that they, you know, were not rationally supported. Well, okay, I can't say anything to that other than that's not what I'd do, and I don't recommend it. You know, I care more about what's true than whether or not it's, you know, makes you feel funny.
Well, what's interesting is that I just read a research paper that talked about children, very young children, and the difference in their beliefs about what happens after you die. And it turns out that extremely young children are much less likely to believe that some part of their consciousness survives death than older children. So what this says is that we're actually teaching children to believe in an afterlife. They don't come, you know, into the world believing that there's an afterlife or that their consciousness in some way survives their physical death. And so I think that in some ways we are actually infecting them with this fear.
Yeah.
And causing them to cling to this.
Which might be a good time to go back to Marius, who called in before the show real quick. You
talk
there,
to
Marius?
him.
I'm here, y'all.
Yeah, can we turn that up again for him, and then we'll turn it back down afterwards?
Sorry again.
Yeah. We can barely hear you.
Okay, there's nothing much I can do. Can you hear me now?
Well, if it's not going to be going out over the stream where they can hear him, then Marius, I apologize. We're just going to have to go ahead and drop this, and we'll talk about the subject off the air because it's the volume on your phone's not even enough to get out to the stream. So I apologize for that. He had called in before the show, and we cranked up the volume in the studio, which won't affect what's going to the feed, to talk about kids and atheism and how you deal with raising kids and broaching the subject. I don't know, you didn't get to chime in much before the show, so.
Yeah, and I guess Marius has a 7-year-old daughter. He's a closet atheist, and he's wondering how he can, I guess, let her know in some way she doesn't have to believe in a God. And so I think that one of the things that I've done with my son, who's almost 5, is I've started introducing him to the concept of like the Greek and Roman myths, because I think the more he learns about other people's views on gods and religion, the less likely he is to accept blindly anyone else's views on this. So I think that that's a good way of inoculating him against, you know, just blindly following a religious belief. And then, of course, as Matt mentioned, you know, Russell has this game that he plays with his son that he introduced to him very young, and it's real or pretend. And you pick something and you ask him if it's real or pretend, and he gets to decide on his own and provide his own justification for his answer. And I think, you know, things like that are really good ways of getting kids to think about what they believe and why they believe them. And that's ultimately what we want them to do. So
the big thing is that, you know, while we are actively in opposition to religion on the whole, you know, it's hey, there was a weird camera shot. You know, we don't believe it. We see no reason why anybody else should believe it. And in many cases, if not most or nearly all cases, we see a great deal of harm, and our concern is with whether or not things are true. So the suggestion that I made was the one I always make, which is to teach your kids how to think instead of what to think or what you think they should think. And that's good and it's pithy and everything else, but more importantly, I wasn't an atheist until I was well over 30. I was a skeptic long before then. I just didn't apply skepticism to my religious beliefs. There are plenty of people who are skeptics and theistic. I just don't happen to think that they're applying skepticism their theism, and in some cases they're denying that it should, but that's a subject for another day. I tend to think that if you can foster a sense of curiosity and kind of go for the awe of discovery and exploration, of getting them to question everything and explore for the answers to those questions, and to be willing to say, I don't know, and none of us know, when we have no good answer, I think they'll end up fine, even if they're, religious for many, many years, or if they happen to be raised in a, unless they're being raised in some particularly damaging, cult that doesn't allow this sort of education to go on. I would hope that most of them are going to, find their way through to seeing reason and seeing the benefits of a rational worldview where we rely on the scientific method and evidence. But.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, like you said, even if they end up being theists themselves, what they will have is the ability to, at the very least, minimize the harm that those beliefs are likely to do. So they're unlikely to accept the claims of some religions that you can't take blood transfusions, or that you can't have vaccinations, or
you should pray instead of going to the hospital.
Right, that you shouldn't use birth control, that you should let God control your fertility.
And maybe you'll be able to, maybe they'll be convinced that they shouldn't be imposing their personal views on everybody else through legislation.
Yes.
We can only hope. Because those are my favorite theists.
Oh,
People
yeah.
like the Reverend Barry Lynn, who runs Americans United that we talked about earlier. He and I will disagree all day long on the whole God subject, all day. And we could have, great rows over it. But we're in agreement on having a secular nation and enforcing and encouraging church-state separation. And those types of ideas you can foster relatively easily by exposing your kid to everything in the world. Mm-hmm. Don't keep them locked up in a little private school with a couple of friends, and they're at church all the time and they never see anything outside. I'm convinced, the 8 years that I spent in the Navy, that helped me understand that my view on the world at the time was incredibly myopic, and while it's been broadened, there's still a lot more to go. So.
Oh, did I tell you my recent discussion with my son regarding the Pledge of Allegiance?
No.
Yeah, because he was taught in school to say the Pledge of Allegiance with the under God part in it, and which he pronounces unaga, because he doesn't get the whole God concept. But whenever I say it, I omit that, and he, for the longest time, was really adamant that you must say it this way, because he's very literal at this age. Well, I finally convinced him the other day that it's not necessary, and that not everybody puts that in there. It wasn't in the original, and I don't say it that way. So he accepts that I say it different from what he's heard everyone else say it. And so it was really funny listening to him say the pledge the other day, because the last part of it, we've got the under God part settled, but now we're into the last part, which is with liberty and juices for all.
Cool.
Yeah, so.
I'm a fan. Juices for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm on board. We've got Barry in Chattanooga. How are you?
I am fine, and congratulations on your award.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks to all the people who voted.
Yes, I watch you guys every Sunday. I'm probably off topic here, but have you had a chance to look at Stephen Hawking's new book, The Grand Design?
I haven't
I
read
haven't
it
read
yet.
it.
So basically, we're talking about press releases and reading what other people have to think.
Right. Well, I have ordered it on Amazon.com. I'm excited about getting it this week. But I did read not just a review, but they interviewed him, and he is saying, and I really liked it. He is saying that the universe had no need of a God to bring itself into existence.
Yeah. And he's not the first. It's just that he may be the one who actually publicizes this idea in a way that it has a much broader reach. We've talked about it before. Lawrence Krauss's lecture that you can watch online, A Universe from Nothing, talks about this. And I talked to Vic Stenger when he was down here in Austin both times. And the first time he was here, he tried to explain this idea. And I didn't remotely grasp it. I simply don't have the requisite understanding of physics and everything to get it. And so the first time I was just like, I like that Vic Stinger guy, but on that one issue, my brain can't quite wrap around it. And the second time we were down, I'd already seen Lawrence Krauss's lecture, and he and I were talking. We were talking about a number of things, including the Large Hadron Collider. But we went off on this idea of a universe from nothing, and I understood it about like that much better.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not remotely in any kind of position to comment on it. It's one of those areas where, as a matter of practical necessity, I have no problem at all accepting that this is the best current scientific explanation that are coming. It's not an appeal. It's not a fallacious appeal to authorities, because these are in fact the authorities in the field. They may be wrong, and if they are, demonstrably wrong, then it'll be through evidence and through the scientific method. I don't have faith that the universe was created from nothing. I just happen to agree with Hawking, and who's basically echoing Laplace, that there's no need for that particular hypothesis. One of the things that I found insanely funny, and I giggled quite a bit, Ray Comfort called Stephen Hawking unscientific.
Yes,
That's
this is.
unbelievable.
To me, that's like somebody who's sitting there eating a TV dinner telling Gordon Ramsay or Graham Elliott that they just don't know food.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. The reviews I have read on this book, and I am not a physicist or a math whiz by any means, but the reviews I have read are all very positive in the sense that the book is written for the layman. It leaves out all the highfalutin math, and it's very understandable. So I'm excited about getting it and reading it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Well, again, congratulations again, and thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Barry. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I hope it's one of those things that really pushes the conversation in a certain direction.
Oh, yeah.
You can watch the trends of discussion over the past 10 years or so. I've been involved in the ACA doing this show for 5 or so. And where the topics are does this. And part of it is driven, most of it I would say is driven by particular apologists. You'll see an apologist put out a video or have a debate where a certain point's raised, and it becomes like the argument of the day, whether it's the transcendental argument or the Kalam cosmological argument or something else. And so we're constantly in this reactionary mode of responding to whatever the current theistic meme is. And on occasion, there'll be something that comes out, and I love it because when it happens, it's something that's, science, and here's the evidence, and it comes out and it pushes the conversation in another direction. It's not simply a response to theistic propositions. It puts theists on the defensive, which, by the way, is where they should be, because they're the ones that are positing something that is contrary to everything we know and understand about the universe. So.
Well, what I love is that no matter what theists are arguing against, they're still on about evolution, which is, that's a done deal, guys.
That whole gravity thing.
Yeah.
It's just angels pulling you down.
And while they're gnashing their teeth and wailing over whether evolution is true or not, science just continues marching on. We just keep continuing to add more to the knowledge base. So
We've got Andrew in Philly. How are you?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
Good.
Thanks for waiting.
Congratulations on the award. I'm so happy for you guys. You deserve it very much.
thank you. Thank you.
So for the past couple of weeks, I've been going to a Bible class at a Christian church. They don't know I'm an atheist. I'm like an atheist Jane Goodall.
Awesome.
Observing them, yeah. Well, like a weird thing, like I noticed that they spend a lot of time trying to show that the Bible is inerrant and has no errors in it. And sometimes I ask questions or I point out contradictions. And when I do that, they tell me, well, no, it's not about the Bible being perfect. It's not about, it not having errors. What this is all about is a personal relationship with Jesus. That's the only thing that matters, that you realize he died on a cross for you and that he saved you. And I tried to point out to them, well, that story, that whole entire concept comes from the Bible. So it seems that they want to have the Bible be literally true, but then they preach that it's not about religion. It's about a personal relationship with Jesus. But is there really a difference between a personal relationship with Jesus and a religion?
Yes-ish.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, let's assume for a second that the Christian hypothesis is actually correct, and that what they're saying is correct. That the important thing is that you have a personal relationship with Jesus. Now, I can't prove that there is no God of that particular religion until they define it in such a way that we can address it. But maybe there is some Jesus, and maybe, for example, my mom has some personal relationship with Jesus, but that's irrelevant to everybody else outside of there. Revelation is necessarily first person. We get that from Hume, etc. But it doesn't have any bearing on me. I cannot distinguish between her personal relationship with Jesus in a real sense versus her delusion of having a personal relationship. The reason I answered yes is that those things are separate from both the religion and the Bible, even though that would be where they would be derived from. Basically what you're dealing with are people who are offering incredibly dishonest responses. They want to claim that the Bible is God's word, and therefore, to the extent possible, it is inerrant and perfect, and it is our, the guiding light that leads us to the truth. And when challenged on those issues, that's when they're going to say, well, it's not so much about the Bible as it is this. It's a complete redirect. It's like somebody asks you if you believe in God, and you say, I don't know what I believe. Or I don't know for sure that there's not a God, actually would be the better redirect. Right. Somebody says, hey, do you believe in God? Well, that's a yes-no question. And it is yes-no. Because we're not asking how strong is your belief or how strong is your disbelief. It's just, do you believe? You either believe or you don't. And if their response is, well, I don't know that there isn't a God. Okay, that's great. I'm sure that's an answer to some question, but it's not an answer to the question I asked. And that's kind of like the sort of response that you could do, but it seems that they've already admitted. It's like they're doing a two-step. It's, yeah, the Bible's not true, but it's about this. And I got no better information for you. I wish I had a better response to that. But it's like saying, we need a better response. We need a better way to talk to schizophrenics. I mean, when you're dealing with someone who isn't going to, or isn't capable because of, I'm not saying these people are crazy or stupid or anything like that, but their religion in particular, the ideas that they have bought into, have constructed a brain that is incapable of dealing with these subjects honestly and actually seeing the flaw. And you can try to point it out, and you can say some of the things that I've talked about. Some of them will finally get it. I mean, I was a fundamentalist for 25 plus years, and eventually I got it. And if I could figure out exactly how I got it, I'd change the world. All I know is that it was a process, and one of the key things was that I actually came to care whether or not my beliefs were true instead of whether or not they were comforting or whether or not they were popular, whether or not I was with the in crowd of people who were constantly reinforcing those beliefs.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, guys.
Sure.
Have a great day. Bye.
Sure. Did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
No, not really. I guess just that I think this is another example of how religion, particularly Christianity, has to evolve in order to survive. Because, if you've got people in there who are doing the same thing, that Andrew was doing, which is, even theists challenging, hey, how come this contradicts this other thing over here? And what about this genocide thing? And when you've got people asking hard questions, if you're going to sit there and say, well, this is actually a good representation of God's character, you're probably going to lose a lot of people on that.
Yeah, my big problem with the honesty of it.
Yeah, it's completely dishonest.
It's like if you were talking about anything else, for example, if you were offering up your evidence for evolution, or you were teaching somebody evolution, which that would be more accurate with the type of sermon and Bible study type thing. So you're teaching somebody about evolution, and you say that this and this and this and this and this happened. And if somebody comes up and were to say, aha, but do you have evidence for this right here? No scientist, no teacher is going to say, well, that one might be a little bit wrong. It's really about this.
Right.
It's just not the way any kind of rational discussion goes about any subject. Religion is the end-all, be-all exception to rational discourse.
Yeah.
We got Steve in Hong Kong.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Guys, how you doing?
Good.
I made sure that I woke up early so I could phone you guys.
I'm impressed.
Okay, so yeah, my question is, well, actually, I should probably state my position first. I was an atheist probably for about 20 years of my life, and the last few years, reading a lot of different types of literature and stuff, mainly more Taoist or Buddhist in my viewpoints and the way I think. So my question to you guys is, who am I on with? I'm with you, Matt, and who else?
And Jen.
Jen, hi. How you
Hi.
doing?
Good.
So I guess my question to you guys is, in relations to the questions regarding suffering and death, how was it kind of like taught to you guys when you were growing up as Christians, and then how do you see it as an atheist now?
Well, when I was growing up, it's the standard story that, death entered the world because of the fall. So that was the explanation for, why we have death.
And suffering.
And suffering, yeah. And as far as the suffering thing, the obvious suffering of people, all you had to do was turn on the news and you'd see that, somebody lost their house in a fire, or, a hurricane hit, or something was happening, people were suffering. And that was always explained that, it was either those people deserved it because, they turned away from God, or, it was a, sort of divine retribution for some other real or imagined crime that they had committed. It was never really a very acceptable answer, and in particular when it seemed like it was just gratuitous, the death of innocent children or something like that, and that was always God works in mysterious ways, and you don't know what God's purpose was, and all this stuff, and like I said, it was just very unsatisfactory, those explanations, and the reality is that sometimes there is no answer. We're humans. We always search for some reason for something to have happened, and sometimes there's just no reason. Things happen.
Not just reason, but intent.
Right.
We tend to try to look for intent in things. So when we see some huge catastrophe like a tsunami or a hurricane that comes in and devastates an area and kills people and completely destroys an economy and makes sure that plenty of other people are going to die in the aftermath from disease or starvation or whatever else, we look at that and say, wow, that's just massive amounts of suffering. Why would that happen? Well, you're already asking the wrong question, because not that why is bad. I mean, you can phrase a why question that would be valid, but when you ask that question, people are looking for a purpose or an intent, and the very question presumes that that's going to be the case. It reminds me of people who would say, if God didn't create the universe, then who did? And by asking who, they're assuming that the answer needs to be a who. And the thing I keep harping on is asking the right questions. The question is, there must be some explanation for the existence of the universe. What is that explanation? And that question does not eliminate possibilities. It doesn't eliminate the possibility of a God or divine power doing it, and it doesn't eliminate the possibility of a scientific naturalistic explanation. So when we look at a tsunami, instead of saying why and implying intent or purpose, we really need to understand more about weather and the universe we live in, the practical reality of it, and you can come to an understanding that, first of all, if this had an intent or purpose behind it, it's vile and malicious. And if your God is sending hurricanes and tsunamis to destroy people, then he's just, beyond my ability to fathom why anybody could or worship or revere that for any reason other than fear. Now, you mentioned that you were an atheist, and these ideas of death and suffering somehow changed your view to kind of a more Taoist or whatever view. My thing is that having been a Christian and now I'm an atheist, what changes my mind is evidence. And I can't see anything in the ideas of death and suffering that would lead me to change my position towards any direction, be it Taoist or Christianity or whatever, because
Right.
there's nothing there. There's no evidence for the benefit of those. So it seems to me that, and I don't know all of your reasons, and I'm happy to have you expound on them, but it seems to me that you're opting for the comfort thing. You're opting for it would just be too sad to live in a world where there wasn't this, and therefore I'm going to go ahead and go for the comforting delusion rather than an evidence-based solution.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could say it's like a security blanket or an illusion, but again, there's no proof for either or, correct?
Well,
So,
Well,
and the thing about Taoism, it's not really a religion. I mean, if anything, it's more like a way of reasoning life, or there's no real God to worship. It's just the way that I'm thinking.
Steve?
You know, so it's not really like Taoism led me in a different way of thinking, but it's
Right.
just like, for example, when I was an atheist, I was on stable ground, and it was actually an astronomy class that I took in university that really sealed it for me. That after that lecture, I was dead set sure I was an atheist. That was 20 years ago. In these last few years, I look back, and it seemed like when I was an atheist, I was on stable ground. I mean, we're just atoms, and when we die, that's it.
What's that have? Okay, Steve, I got to stop you because now we're like 3 minutes away from the first thing. You said there's no proof either or. What do you mean by that?
Whether life continues after death or life just ends.
Sure.
Right.
And
what I'm saying is my position as an atheist before was life just ends and then
Sure,
that's it.
I understand, Steve. But what I'm saying is that once again,
is that your position too?
No, I'm saying that once again you framed something in a way that's false by saying either or, that there's no proof that this is true or this is false. You've portrayed it as, for example, theism and or the belief in a God and the belief there is no God. That's not atheism.
Well, okay, then in that respect, in how I saw myself as an atheist was I was pretty sure that there was no God.
Sure.
Or
Okay.
forget God, because God's not even in the equation in my views. It's not even in.
So
I'm not
do you
thinking
believe
that
in a
there is
God?
God or there's a heaven or anything like that.
No,
I am taking the view that there's probably death is just something like in the time span of a.
Well, you said probably.
Of a nanosecond or something like that, and it's going to be the next stage of something else, which
Why-
I don't know what it is.
Why?
What evidence? I mean, you said probably. So what evidence did
Right.
you use to determine that it was probable?
Well, it's okay. Just going back to those scenarios of where you're confronted in a position where you're able to put yourself in a real dire situation, and you are confronting death. Well, what are you thinking as an atheist as those seconds are going by?
What?
When it's
How is
about
that
to
an
end?
answer to my question? How is that evidence for your position? I was asking. I was asking
Okay,
what evidence you
I
had that
don't
made
have-
you
I
determine.
don't have evidence for my position. It's the way that my mind will think, like to rationally think it out.
Why? Okay.
And-
And
well-
why would you believe something that you don't have evidence for?
Well, here, let me try it this way, like asking you a question.
Sure.
If it's okay. If you're
Since I'm not
capable
going to get an
or
answer, I
willing
guess
to,
I'll answer.
Sorry, what was your answer?
I'm saying if I can't get an answer to the question I ask, sure, go ahead and ask me a question and I'll answer.
Oh, okay. Well, the question is, I mean, like you said, those tsunami, hurricane types of questions, and you see all that suffering and death as a witness to it. But I don't know if you're really able to picture yourself in the situation where you are the person that is suffering.
No, I
And-
probably cannot accurately picture myself in that situation. I can come up with the best approximation possible. How is that relevant
Right, so
to anything we're
so
discussing?
if you are able to picture yourself in that situation as an atheist, and let's say death is just right around the corner, in your mind, what are you thinking about?
In my mind,
As an atheist.
I've
Yeah.
actually been in situations like that.
Okay, yeah. So
And-
what are you thinking about?
In my mind, it's I'm going to do everything I can to live another day. That's what's in
Okay.
my mind.
Okay. I think
I'll
that
tell
would
you
be
this.
kind of
I'll tell you this.
instinct or natural, but
Steve, Steve,
you are facing death. Yeah.
Steve, I'll tell you this. I'm pretty sure that the people who in those life or death situations spend a lot of time focusing on whether or not there's an afterlife are going to find out really quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And so in the atheist mind, or actually in my mind, let's just say in my mind when I was an atheist, I was pretty sure that there was no afterlife.
I am too.
Right?
Yep.
Pretty sure.
You are too, right? You're pretty
Pretty
sure.
sure.
But it's kind of like, I mean, so in your mind, you're not thinking about anything supernatural as those seconds go by, right?
Correct.
Correct.
So does that mean you don't like the idea of?
No, it means I
life
don't
after
have
death?
any reason to believe that it's possible, so why waste any time on it?
Well, you have a few seconds to go, anyways. If you were still not, if you were not deluded and you still were able to rationalize using your brain.
Let's say for a second, for a split second, I did contemplate the idea that maybe there could have possibly been an afterlife. How in the hell does that provide any evidence for the idea? Saying that at the last moment when somebody is being threatened, that their mind may go to the possibility that they're not going to die is not in any way evidence that they're not going to die.
Right, I agree with that.
So why, back to my
I guess
original question, why would you believe something for which you have no evidence?
Well, here's what I tried to kind of test myself in my brain. If I don't believe that there's a God,
right?
So
you're still an atheist.
I'm not even going to contemplate anything that is supernatural in those last seconds. But then I was thinking, I don't like the idea. I mean, do you like the? Are you both of you taking the argument that you like the idea that life just stops?
Look,
and then,
what we like or what we wish would happen has no bearing on what the evidence says actually happens.
Well, no. What I'm saying, I'm putting aside the evidence for this moment because you're
putting aside the evidence across the board. You've just admitted that you believe something because you like it better. I don't work that way. I couldn't possibly work that way. Now, to answer your question about whether or not I have any appeal to it, I would like to live as long as possible. However, the various paradigms about afterlives, most of them I find repugnant, especially the ones like, for example, in Christianity, where your entire existence here, your 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever years, turns out to be some big cosmic joke, and then the real life starts where you're either rewarded or punished forever. I find that repugnant. Of course I wouldn't want it to be true, because it tells me a number of things about what's actually gone on in reality that are offensive. Are there other ideas of afterlives that I don't find offensive? Sure. But none of it matters, because no matter how much I might wish it were true, it ain't true. I might wish that I won the lottery, but if I start running around acting like I've won the lottery, I'm going to find myself in a great deal of trouble.
See, you kind of just basically said you don't like the idea. You wish it were true. So what I'm saying, what I'm thinking is, in those last few seconds, the fact that you wish that your thoughts of life were not true, and that the fact that you wish they were true, those last few seconds, you would probably dig into your brain and look at the supernatural, wouldn't you?
Well, I don't know for exactly what I do. Go ahead.
I
thought that's what you just said.
like I said, I've actually been in situations where it was a life or death situation, okay? And I mean, I was within minutes of dying, and if, well, I'll try not to tell a war story here that's too long.
Okay, no problem.
But essentially what happened was I was flying a helicopter in Germany, had taken off from Coleman Army Airfield, and was cleared on an IFR flight plan to an Air Force base in Western Germany.
Right.
And shortly after departure, we entered the clouds. I was with a friend of mine who's my co-pilot, and he actually had not very much experience on instrument flight rules. Mm-hmm. As soon as we entered the clouds, he got vertigo. And so he was sitting there wrestling with this, and I don't know if you know much about vertigo, but it's actually like your brain malfunctions. So I was flying, I was making radio calls, I was managing the cockpit, everything by myself for a while. And about the time we leveled off, I had noticed before that we were picking up some ice, which is normally not a problem. By the time we leveled off, I realized that we had picked up a significant amount of ice, and when I did a cross-check, I looked at my engine temperature, and it was in the yellow, which means that the ice was encroaching on the engine inlet and starving the engine for air. Okay. I also noticed that I'd picked up about 13 pounds of torque, which means there was over an inch of ice on my rotor blades. If you get more than half an inch of ice on your rotor blades, you cannot auto-rotate. So if my engines failed because it was starved for air, I would have to enter auto-rotation, but I could not auto-rotate, which meant I was going to be basically a brick. All right. I had a few minutes to make a decision about what to do. All right. And, you know, the fact that I'm still alive tells you that I did not do what my crew chief was doing, which he started praying in the back seat. Fortunately, I didn't need him to do anything for me. But I contacted Frankfurt Approach, got us vectored back over to Coleman, and Coleman brought me in on a precision approach. And as we were coming in, the thing that was going through my mind was not, you know, I hope some supernatural entity bails me out of this, was I hope I don't hit the power lines that are on the approach end at Coleman Army Airfield.
I mean, that sort of makes sense. I mean, generally people. The thing is, you are facing death. I agree with your situation. I'm not trying to put anything away from your situation or anything like that. But I mean, you weren't even at that mode of thinking, you know, of loved ones or whatever, because that's usually what happens towards the very end. You weren't quite to the very end
everyone.
yet. Does that make sense?
I don't know how much longer we're going to waste on this, Steve. You believe stuff because you like it. You believe stuff because you like it, not because you have evidence.
No,
right?
I agree. There is no evidence. But rationally thinking, I think if you don't like the idea of life ending and just like that, a brain rationally, I would assume, would rationally think of supernatural things.
You have a different definition of rational than I do. And what I like or don't like, is irrelevant.
I mean, I agree that
I don't like the fact that I'm broke, but I don't go around acting like I'm not.
I agree that what you're describing does happen. It does happen for some people. I don't agree that it's rational.
And I don't think it's relevant. Because we're talking about whether or not something is true, and we're also talking about whether or not something is believable, whether or not belief has been justified. And you called to say that you used to be an atheist, but now you've changed your position, and we've already established that it's because you prefer a different view on reality that has no ties to what's actually true or demonstrable.
Well, I would say, I mean, that makes sense, but like in terms of truth, I mean, everyone is, well, not everyone. I mean, my wife is definitely not one of a truth seeker, but you know, normally atheist people are generally knowledgeable. I mean, they know a bit about everything, whether it be science or any kind of religion or whatever. They know a bit about everything.
I don't think that's true either, but I'll let you keep going.
So, like in those situations where you are towards the very end, I mean, and you are confronting death, I would assume that a rational brain, unless they like the idea that life ends and that's it, that they would probably think of supernatural, whether it be...
Why do you think that's rational? Here, it's really simple. I have a brain that doesn't like the idea that I'm going to die. And when I'm dying, what reason would I have to spend time contemplating? I realize that it does happen. What rational reason would I have to waste time contemplating something that I don't think exists? If I'm rational, wouldn't I spend that time in a way that's more productive, perhaps thinking about thinking about the parts of life that I enjoyed, thinking about the parts of life that I enjoyed, thinking about loved ones, or saying, oh, wow, I'm actually going to die. Let's see what happens. Hello?
So, yeah, I'm here. So the position that you're taking, that you like the idea that life just ends.
No.
We never said
Well,
that. I mean,
To some
No, but
extent,
what I'm saying is,
To some extent,
in
yes.
the final seconds,
to some extent, yes.
I would think it's not just rational, but probably by instinct, a human brain would think about supernatural things,
Okay.
whether it be
Stop,
floating
Steve.
through a wormhole
Steve.
or
No.
going to be reincarnated or
Steve.
going. Yep.
Stop. You have no idea what rational means. You've just equated instinct with rational.
Well, no, I didn't. I was
Yeah, you did.
saying rational, really, but
And
I'm trying to paint the picture that I think a brain, if they don't like the idea, that it would automatically.
we can't keep going over this,
think
Steve.
about supernatural
yeah,
things.
Steve, we can't keep going over this. There's other callers
Okay,
waiting.
all right.
he's saying the same
Okay,
thing
okay.
over and over.
Cool. Thanks a lot for calling,
All right.
though.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye-bye.
Yeah. I agree it happens.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that it's rational. I wanted a rational reason. Of course, I wanted a rational reason to change my beliefs, and all I can get is I like it better. Okay.
Well, and I knew when I told that story, it's like he's going to look at this, he's going to say, "Oh no, but you weren't
quite there.
quite there." It's like, okay.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the guy behind you was.
Yeah.
And instead of me thinking about whether or not I'm hitting power lines, I'd have been saying, "Would you shut the hell up? I'm trying to save our butts."
Yeah, fortunately, I couldn't hear him over the
that's
you know,
very good.
the engine noise. So,
Yeah, pray quietly. I'm trying to think here.
yeah, he wasn't transmitting his prayers. So.
We put prayer closets in the back of helicopters now. We've got John. It says King of Prussia.
Yeah.
Is that a real place?
It's around Valley Forge, close to Philadelphia.
Oh yeah, awesome. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for calling.
Hi. Yeah, thanks. I basically am calling a friend wanted me to sort of try out an argument that I have for the existence of like a human soul, the spirit having like reason, free will, and consciousness.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Matter of fact,
first,
reason, free will, and consciousness, that's 3 big ones.
yeah.
Go ahead.
But I wanted to try to just make a few points briefly, if that's okay.
Okay.
Just about like my understanding of the idea from earlier in the show, where like religion and the poverty thing, how they correlate to each other. I personally think that it is more like being in that state will lead you more to an awareness of your dependence on God, and not vice versa. I think like the fact that there's poverty in a lot of those areas is due to like soil infertility, population density, the fact that they didn't have the same resources and inventors from the Industrial Revolution, things like that.
Okay, that's
right.
that's one of 2 takes on it. My question to that is, you're convinced that it's poverty that leads people to these more religious positions.
I think that's one factor that can be.
Sure,
yeah.
sure. My
Yeah.
follow-up question is, do you think that has any ties to whether or not those religions are true?
I don't really think so, but I wasn't really planning to go there.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to check.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And you mentioned something about like the cosmic joke of our immortal life. I think of that more as like a preparation period. Like I'm not universalist where everybody has the same destination in the afterlife necessarily. One of the previous callers said something about the Christian Bible study. I think, it depends on the denomination what their approach to the Bible is. And, of course, in any religion, you'll have believers who are more or less honest or sinful or even knowledgeable about their own beliefs.
Okay.
But to get into my argument here, and I kind of see this as sort of a background for belief in God, although that's not what I'm trying to argue here. But I kind of see, like, what reasons do I have to believe in religion? I think, to a certain extent, it's rational to believe other people and other traditions. Like, why would they bother going through the centuries with these beliefs? Cosmological things, like who started the Big Bang, if there was something like that. Again, you said, like, I'm posing the question as a who, but...
Well, I'm a little confused, actually, because
yeah.
you said you were going to argue for the existence of a soul, and that it wasn't necessarily, you weren't going to necessarily argue for the existence of God, and yet the first couple things you pop off are the argument from popularity, which is why would they believe these things for so long, to which the answer is because they didn't know any better. Yeah. And then the cosmological argument, which is one of many arguments that have been formally presented that are all logically flawed at some level.
Right.
Whether it's, the anthropic principle or teleological. I mean, if you want to go down that road, we can, but there are a bunch of callers waiting. We only got 20 minutes left, so if you want to just get to the souls one, that'd be great.
So really, I was just going to say those are sort of my own ways to move on from the basic point here, which is like, I did not create myself, but I believe I have a spirit, so therefore I have to look elsewhere. So my argument as far as the spirit itself or the soul...
Hey, I got to pause you again, John.
Yeah.
And I do this for a reason, and it's because if there's a point of contention early on in a discussion, and I sit here and let you get all the way to the end, by the time we get back to it, you've developed from that.
Right.
So you said that you didn't create yourself, and you believe you have a soul.
Right.
Okay, I agree. You didn't create yourself. I think we'd all be in agreement that you are the product of your mother and father.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing that you said, where you believe you have a soul, if you're going to start off with that as a presupposition, you've kind of already set yourself up to argue in a circle.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying I draw that from the argument that I'm about to go into.
Oh, okay. So you just stated the conclusion up front. Go ahead.
Well,
Yeah,
so what are you defining? What's your definition of a soul?
So, my friend pointed out that I'd probably have to be pretty good with that. I think it's like the non-material, self-conscious aspect of your being that incorporates free will and reasoning, like the mind.
Okay, but we already know that the brain's responsible for reasoning.
Well, we know that at least what I would say, the soul makes use of the brain and draws from our perceived knowledge from our senses.
So the soul is the non-material part of your being that uses your brain.
Yeah.
Okay. What reason do you have for thinking that even exists?
For the soul.
Because I'm curious, because in a lot of ways I could say that a soul is the non-material part of this cup that keeps the water in.
Right. So
I already know that function's done by the cup. So what justification do I have for adding a soul as a non-material, non-demonstrable aspect of this cup that does the function that we already know the cup does?
Well, you could say that it never acts on its own behalf. But then we get into the argument for perception of mind and other beings, this hypersensitive agency detection device theory of mind.
Yeah.
But the point I wanted to get to is that I think in our own consciousness, the fact that we have an understanding of what, even discussing this with you, the fact that I say the word soul or spirit and include these other things, consciousness and free will, I think just the fact that we have an understanding of what they mean sort of proves that we have some non-physical element.
Really?
That can,
So
that
the
can
fact
convey
that
to us the fact that there is meaning there.
So John, the fact that when I say unicorn, you understand what it means? Does that mean unicorns exist?
No, but here's
All right,
why.
so that debunks what you just said, I think, right?
Well, here's why you believe you... Well, so with a unicorn, basically you have the image of a horse.
No. All right, we could pick something entirely different. What we're talking about is we've defined a term, and it has entered the public consciousness as a meme. That doesn't point to whether or not that doesn't tell us whether or not it points to anything that actually exists.
Well, here's
you can
what
do
I'm saying.
the unicorn model.
As an example.
You can do
the
unicorn.
That represents
John.
things that we do know the meaning of. A horse, a body, a shape, a dimension, length, width, volume, mass, whatever. But all these other things are things that we know of that are not spiritual. Right. But when I say spirit or soul, there's no non-material, or there's no material things that add up and convey the meaning.
Which is why we had you define it at the beginning. Because when you say spirit or soul, I have no idea what you're talking about until you define it. All I know is that spirit and soul are words used by people to describe a number of things, and they all mean it slightly differently, which is why I have this huge problem with the word spirituality, because it's a useless term. So we had you define soul as what it is, and you gave us a definition. That's why I have an understanding of what you're talking about.
Okay,
it's not
now,
because it points to something real.
But tell me why you understand free will.
Why I understand free will?
How
I don't
does
know.
that convey meaning
Probably
to you?
because I was taught the concept and have debated it a number of times.
Yes, but why did the original people who developed the concept come up with that concept?
Well, they're describing the limitations of behavior.
That's very vague.
We make up words.
Will. To have a will, where does that where do we derive that from?
Desire?
It's a brain state.
How is it a brain state? You haven't identified a gene that makes that happen. You haven't pointed
Oh,
to the
Okay,
exact
John,
fabric of the brain.
John, you don't have to identify a gene to know that something's a brain state. What you have to do is use an EKG.
No, see, you're arguing from the same sort of abstract
EEG.
points that you're accusing me of arguing from.
What? Sorry, what?
You're using the same sort of abstract points that you're accusing me of by saying brain state.
There's
No.
nothing
Very
abstract about a brain
non-detailed.
state.
No, it's not. It's not abstract at all. The fact that we don't completely understand it doesn't mean that we cannot test and identify discrete electrochemical brain states. We do it all the time.
But we can never prove the direct relationship between every one of those and a behavior.
So what?
So
We-
it's
we cannot-
incomplete. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it proves the
so
point.
you're
I'm
saying you're
it-
making
you
a great
haven't
big
shown
argument from
anything
ignorance
else.
that since we don't know everything, you can then posit something else that we don't know, and it suddenly becomes viable. Sorry, that
Well-
doesn't work.
Okay, let me try to sort of reiterate my explanation there. It's not the fact that I'm pointing out this other alternative, the soul or spirit or free will, reason. What I'm saying is the fact that we can get a meaning from words like free will and consciousness shows that we have those things.
No, it doesn't.
No, it
No, it
doesn't.
doesn't. We give the words meaning. We have invented the words and attribute and associated them with things, and we define them. We use them in specific ways. It
Okay,
doesn't in any
but
way.
what if I
it
say
doesn't-
belongadonk? Does that mean
John,
anything to you?
John, it doesn't in any way demonstrate that the thing we're talking about is real. And that's what the unicorn demonstration was for, or I could have picked Kermabelfluffen. And if
But-
I tell you that a Kermabelfluffen is a particular type of alien that doesn't map to anything physical here, you have the concept in your brain. And once everybody else knows what it is, whether it's a fairy or a leprechaun or a Kermabelfluffen, the meme exists, but the item does not. Do not confuse the map for the place.
Correct. And I agree that for that same reason, the, what's it called, ontological argument for God
Yeah.
is not valid.
Okay.
However,
I agree on that.
back to the, well, for one thing, I believe the fact that we have this spirit allows us to be wrong about
Okay,
the spirit.
stop.
So your alien
Stop.
non-material
John.
thing we can be wrong about
John.
because we still have the non-material idea.
John, you don't get to say the fact that we have this spirit. You have to actually demonstrate that before I'm going to let you call it a fact.
Well, I meant the fact that we have the word and the meaning.
The fact that we have the word does what?
It's along with the alien thing that you said, like the fact that we can, okay, not the fact, but I mean, it is a fact for some of us that we understand the meaning for that word. And I think that with your alien example, like if you can associate that with something that's not physical, I would conjecture that that's because we have this soul that lets us think about things that are non-material.
You're only just defining the soul as non-physical. I'm saying that every attribute that people give to a soul we can identify physically, except for the part that we can't test at all, which is the idea that it continues after we're dead. You talk about the soul
I don't
being.
think
You
you
talk
can
about
point
this,
physically to
John.
where free will derives.
John, you talk about the soul being responsible for thought, reasoning, free will, consciousness.
Right.
Those are all things that we can identify as brain states. You have no
you
reason.
Can't. You
Yes.
claim to make that, but we can't. You can see activity in the brain, but that's not what consciousness is. That's just coming up with the memory stored and the way we move our arm and everything going on at the same time.
John, do you know anything about cognitive neuroscience?
A little bit.
Then
Google-
how can you make these statements that these brain states don't map to specific like intent or emotions or what?
Because
how
I'm
can you make
aware
that
of the
statement?
progress of the research in that field.
No, I
Yes,
don't think
I know
you
enough
are.
about it to say that.
I can guarantee you you're not. For example, something we've talked about a number of times, one of the most brilliant people on the planet in this area, V.S. Ramachandran, had done studies in split brain patients where you can question both brains and they have distinct personalities. And in one case, one half of the brain was a theist, and in another case, the other half of the brain was an atheist. Now, when they split that patient's brain, did they get it two souls?
Wait, can you say that again?
A split brain
Not following
patient,
you,
a
that's all.
split brain patient where the corpus callosum's been split, divides the brain, and each half of our brain controls a different part of the body. And
Okay.
I'll get the hemispheres confused, but let's say for the sake of the argument that it's the left hemisphere that controls speech and the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. In any case, whether I got that backwards or not, in a patient like that, they were able to actually ask it questions because you're going to hear out of both ears. and they would have the one half of the brain would be able to answer with the mouth, and the other half of the brain would be able to answer by taking the right hand and pointing to answers. And in this case, one half of the brain was a theist. When asked if they believed in God, it said yes, and the other half of the brain said no. Now, did that human being who had its brain split get two souls, and how did that happen?
The soul tapped into the brain in the one side and not the other.
Okay.
And you base this on what?
I can only say that that's possible. I can't say it's necessarily true, but you can't disprove it either.
So what you're
Oh,
saying...
please.
Aside from the main point that
Okay,
I'm trying
stop.
to make.
John, stop. First of all, saying you can't disprove it is not an argument in favor of you. But second of all, what you did just do implicitly is state that this person has half a brain that does all of the things that you attribute to the other half of the brain, and it does it without a soul. We're done. The rest is just posturing. Sorry. Michael in Memphis, how you doing?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for taking my call. Appreciate it.
Sure, thanks for waiting. We got like 10 minutes left. I'm going to try and get through
I
these.
know. I'm looking at the clock going, damn. But,
Yeah.
hey, I just want your comment here real quick. I was born and raised a Christian evangelical. My parents were ministers, and, you know, I'm 40 years old. Finally, at 30, my brain started kicking in, and I've been an atheist ever since.
You and me both, bro.
Yeah, I know. And so I find myself intrigued. I'm always watching Christian shows and listening to Christian radio, like talk radio, because I'm always intrigued
you're a
about what
masochist.
Christian...
Yeah.
What's that?
Because you're a masochist.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting. We're short on time. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'll get right to my question. So last night I was watching Benny Hinn, and I haven't seen him in a long time, and I was disgusted and mortified and yet intrigued by this guy, and about how my wife and I was saying, wow, my wife was telling me, man, he's got these people in a trance. I mean, he would touch these people and they would fall down, and he would pick people up on the stage and they would fall down. And one time he did something, and like 300 people in the front rows all fell down at the same time, and I just kind of
Waves his coat.
Yeah.
He waves his coat and they fall over.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. But these people buy into it so much that I don't know if they are anticipating falling down, so they're just waiting for the signal or what.
Yeah, there's an ancient book, which I had to go actually look up because I always invert this. It's a two-part title, and I always get part of it wrong. Charles Mackay's Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. This is, I think it was originally a 19th century work, or maybe early 20th, I'm not sure, that looks at a phenomenon just like this. I agree with you. I'd like to sit here and say, I don't know why it's going on. Why are these people, why are they so gullible? Are they stupid or whatever? It's not the case that they're stupid. And
Right.
while I think gullible may be viable, what it is we find that people do things in crowds that they wouldn't normally do. And they also do things under the, as we found out during the under the guise of authority that they wouldn't normally do. The shock
Right.
experiments that I always
Yeah.
forget too. I can't remember everything.
Well, I
You're
just
talking
wanted your
about
thoughts
the,
on it. I
Maybe that's
had
what
a
happens when
feeling
you don't
were
have a
gonna say-
soul. Your
Yeah.
brain can't remember everything.
You're talking about Stanley Milgram's
Yes.
experiments
Yes.
and also the Stanford prison experiments that people do things.
So yeah, I don't know why any better than you do, Michael.
Oh, that's all good. Hey, I know you got another caller coming up here, and I'll let you go. But thanks for your input, and love your guys' show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
See you later. Bye.
We've got Kelly in Austin.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure,
no
we're
problem.
really short on time.
Okay, so I just want a quick answer, I guess. Many people have the belief that an afterlife and God go together. I think that even if there is an afterlife, that doesn't necessarily mean there's a God.
I agree.
I agree.
You agree with that?
Yep.
Okay, so I think, in other words, the continuity of something beyond physical form doesn't mean that there's necessarily a God.
Correct.
Okay, great. I just wanted to confirm your ideas about that.
Well, awesome.
That was
You get the
easy.
call of the day thing because that was quick and easy. And you're
Well,
in
thank you very
Austin, which
much.
we love people calling from Austin.
Yes.
Hey, we're actually coming to the dinner.
Okay, cool.
Oh.
We'll see you then.
Awesome.
Okay, awesome.
All right.
Bye.
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 Everything's awesome.
It is.
There's only a couple minutes left. David, I'll try to get to you before we get out of here. As a reminder, we do go to dinner after the show at Threadgill's at 301 West Riverside Drive after the show's over. Also, if you didn't get through, you can email tv@atheist-community.org, and that gets to us. And please be sure and visit the website, atheist-community.org, to find more information about the group, including a calendar of events and information about the voter's guide will be up shortly. All right, David in Austin, you get to be the last call.
Hey, guys, real quick. I just needed Jen to requote the study about when children begin to believe in an afterlife. I missed that.
Oh, yeah, actually, I don't have that in front of me, and so I don't know the exact...
Is it older children do believe and younger don't? Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's basically what it is that older children are significantly more likely to believe that their consciousness survives their physical death than much younger children.
Younger don't. Okay, and real quick, and I'll get off here. Matt, I got to call you out on something. I'm a fan of the show, but I think believing in the guy explaining to you about the self-creating universe while not understanding him is an act of faith.
No, I'm not saying that I believe that it's true. I'm saying that I believe this is the best explanation offered by science at the moment. I can't be convinced of something that I don't understand.
Well, are you not convinced of it and you don't understand it, right?
I don't understand it, so I am not convinced that it's actually true. I am convinced.
The way you explained it earlier, it did sound a little bit like either faith or, appeal to authority.
Sure. Well, the thing is, faith is believing in something without good reason and evidence. Now, if I understood it reasonably well, it's not a fallacious appeal to authority because these are actual authorities in the issue.
Yeah.
The appeal to authority is only a fallacy if you're talking about 9 out of 10 doctors prefer vanilla ice cream.
Right, but wouldn't someone else say the people they believe are the authorities as well?
The thing is, it's not the people, it's the science. The science is the authority. The people that we're talking about, for example, like Hawking, these are the representatives of the evidence. The evidence is there for everybody to review. It's part of the peer review process. It's for everybody to critique. And if I have 20 renowned physicists who are coming forward and saying, we've all reviewed this evidence, and I'm sorry that you can't understand it, but this is what the evidence says, I have good reason to believe that they are probably correct. It's not an exercise of faith in the sense that I don't have a reason. That's not quite where we're at with this thing, though. It's like the...
I mean, I'm sure a Catholic would say, the Pope's an authority and 20 cardinals back.
Sure, and the second he actually demonstrates that he's an authority by providing some evidence and putting it up in a peer-reviewed process so that other people can do it too, I'll buy that too. Right now, there's not a single clergy person on the planet that's demonstrated that they're an authority on anything or that they're particularly useful for anything. Most of them seem to just be leeches on society.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Sure, thanks a lot.
Yes. Yes.
We're completely, almost, maybe, possibly out of time.
Yeah.
There's like 1 minute left in the show, and I did the announcements earlier. There's, we got Pat in Pasadena. If you can do it in 30 seconds, we can do this.
Okay.
Go.
I was just saying that most people that subscribe to traditional Christianity have totally misunderstood the scriptures. Those are allegories. They were never meant to be taken literal, as many have, and they have different messages and meanings for us to live by as human beings. The different characters are us, people, and it shows you the ones that are living on the negative side and the positive side, and we all know right from wrong, and we all have to up our conscience to realize that there's nobody dying, nobody's coming to get anybody to save him anything. There's no human being calling himself God. It's all energy.
I got you, and I had to put you on hold. We are out of time.
Yeah.
And why do the good theists always call me with 10 seconds left in the show? Thanks, everybody. I won't be here next week. I'll be going to go pick up Beth and bring her to Texas, which we're all happy about. And we'll see you in